Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me back there? Awesome. I want to thank you for being here tonight. We're grateful that you've chosen to spend your evening with us and to be part of the space for reflection, connection, and for storytelling. I'm happy to introduce our facilitator for tonight. Christina Frangou is an independent health journalist whose work has appeared in The Guardian, The Toronto Star, Maclean's, and more. She's currently the Western correspondent for The Walrus, in addition to her full-time teaching jobs, teaching journalism at SAIT and the University of Toronto. Over her career, Christina has been honored with some of Canada's most prestigious awards in journalism, including the recognition from the Canadian Journalism Foundation and the Canadian Women's Foundation for her work covering gender inequities. But she's perhaps best known for a story she wrote about losing her young husband, Spencer, to cancer in 2013. And that story received international acclaim. And that's how she first met Kelsie Snow. We're honored that Christina is our first facilitator for the series. So please join me in welcoming Christina.
I think we'll both come. I'm Christina, this is Kelsie, but why don't we just sit down and I'll give you a proper introduction while we're sitting there. It feels weird not talking into that microphone, but we're good. Okay. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I do a lot of public talks, but this one is really special to me. Kelsie has become my friend, and she is also one of the most exquisite storytellers that I have ever had the privilege to read or to listen to. We met because after my husband died and after her husband was diagnosed, she interviewed me for her podcast, and from there developed a friendship built on talking about really, really hard things. And I will try and keep that in mind tonight as we have a conversation in front of people, that maybe I should remember that this is not just two friends sitting down talking about the hard things. One of the reasons that Kelsie has such power in the way she tells her story is she is an incredible journalist. She covered professional sports for the Boston Globe and the Los Angeles Times and other very prestigious newspapers in the United States. And through that work, she met another sports writer by the name of Christina Snow. And they got married. He convinced her to come to Calgary when he took a job for the Calgary Flames. They had two babies, no longer babies, one a boy and a girl. And then in 2019, as many of you know, Chris was diagnosed with ALS. And the two of them, but mostly Kelsie, decided to keep telling their story publicly. And she did so through her blog and through her podcast. And through that work, she really reached hundreds of thousands of people. Chris died in September 2023, and Kelsie's now stepping into a new role at the ALS Society of Alberta and the Alberta ALS Research Network. I was just worrying about where to put Alberta for the two of those, so I had to look up to make sure I had it right. And I feel like this is kind of the big public kickoff of this new role for Kelsie, so thank you for having me here to be a part of it. My friends, let's do the housekeeping first.
Yeah, sure. We wanted to tell everybody that these beautiful hoodies, this is the back, are available to purchase tonight. This is a fundraiser that Frida Backlund, Flames captain Michael Backlund's wife, did with the ALS Society. She designed this hoodie. Frida's mom passed away of ALS when I think Frida was just 15 years old. So these are available to purchase in the lobby if you're interested. So just wanted to share that with everybody.
All right. So I got lost on the way here, and I was, sort of thinking about tonight. And we had talked about our outfits and making sure one person wasn't too dressed up, and that we weren't both wearing bright red jumpsuits or whatever. And we sort of avoided talking about something, and that's that when you are looking after someone who is sick, or you are the person who's sick, or you have lost someone, there are all these firsts that you go through. There is like the first big, scary ambulance ride. There is the first thing you do after they've passed away, the first anniversaries. And I actually don't know if this feels like a big, sorry, AV team, a big, scary, like, first for you to be here tonight talking about this. How does it feel?
I feel like I've never stopped talking about it. Maybe just in my own head for a while after Chris died. It feels right to be in this space amongst the ALS community. It feels like what Chris wanted me to do, and I feel like he'd be really proud of me. When Chris was diagnosed, we were sitting in like a cafeteria at the University of Miami. That's where he was diagnosed, and he said, well, you have to tell the story, and you're going to tell it. You'll tell it way better. Chris was a beautiful writer, but he said, you'll tell it better than I would, and I want you to tell the story. So we knew we'd have this platform, and you know, I feel like it's my responsibility and it's my purpose to keep telling this story for a lot of reasons, to raise awareness around ALS, but also to talk about grief and loss and caregiving and what all of that looks like. It ties into ALS, but that's a part of life for most people at some point.
It becomes really clear in reading your work and especially in listening to the interviews that you and Chris did together on the podcast, which I think are just remarkable examples of storytelling because they're so raw. But you are both incredible storytellers, and that comes through. And I think I'm a big fan of journalism, obviously, and I think journalism is what brought you together. So maybe why don't we just start there?
Okay. Yeah.
Tell us how you met.
I was a sports reporting intern at the Boston Globe in between my third and, I'm going to speak Canadian here, I would say in American, I would say junior and senior years of college, so I'll say third and fourth years of university. And Chris was the newly hired Boston Red Sox beat writer for the Globe. So he was quite young. When I went to interview at the Globe for the summer job, it was in December that I went to interview for it, and they said, oh, we're getting a young staff. We just hired, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so, and we just hired Chris Snow to cover the Boston Red Sox. And I was like, oh, I know that name. The summer before that, I had been at the Los Angeles Times interning, and they said, oh, our intern left early last year because he got a job covering hockey. His name was Chris Snow. And so I thought, this guy's like everywhere, and also he's getting a lot of really good jobs at a really young age. So I ended up meeting him, and I realized for all of his good jobs, he was definitely best edited. He stuck his foot in his mouth a few times when we first met, and but he had this big, beautiful smile, and he's beautiful blue eyes. And all of a sudden, on days when I would be covering a Red Sox game, he would be offering to pick me up at my apartment. And I lived that year with the other sports reporting intern who actually also went to university with Chris. And one morning I said, oh, Chris is coming to pick me up for the game. And he was like, Snow never drives me to Fenway. So yeah, that was that. And
then I don't know how many years you were together before you got married, but you guys were babies.
We were really young, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when we met, I was before my last year of university, and so then we dated sort of that whole year, and I was going back for a second summer at the Globe to intern after I graduated, and that right before I went back to Boston for the summer, he left journalism, and that was when he moved into a front office job. He worked for the Minnesota Wild. And so at that point for us, it was kind of, well, what are we going to do here, right? I was going to not get a job in Minnesota, most likely. That's not really how journalism works. And I had some interviews lined up, like the South Florida Sun Sentinel, covering high schools and things like that. And it became clear pretty quickly that we weren't interested in that. So yeah, we'd only been dating a year when we got engaged. And then we got married a year and a half after that. Yeah, so we were not old.
And then Chris took the job to come to Calgary.
Yeah.
You are quite pregnant at the time. But I wonder, like, what did you know about ALS then?
Yeah, when we just started dating, Chris told me that his uncle, at that point, so Chris's ALS was familial. 10 to 15% of ALS is familial, and the rest is sporadic. So if you have a parent who had ALS or has a gene, you have basically, they say, a coin flip chance of getting that gene from your parent. At that point, his one paternal uncle had passed away shortly before I met Chris. And at that point, his dad actually had gotten the genetic test. His dad knew he had the gene, which meant Chris knew he had a chance. I don't know how much Chris really knew about his likelihood of having the gene or not. And if he had the gene, I don't know if he knew the likelihood, which if you have the gene is almost 100% that you will develop ALS in your lifetime. So he mentioned it to me, and we were invincible. We were like, our early 20s, and I have a lot of history of Alzheimer's in my family, and it was kind of our feeling was like, well, that was definitely a future Kelsie problem.
Yeah, I get that. I
Yeah.
understand that. Spencer died of kidney cancer, but was born with malformed kidneys. And, someone, a doctor somewhere along the way had said to him, it's like really hard to predict what's going to happen, but, sooner or later there are going to be problems. But, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
And at that point, for Chris's genetic disorder, there was no action you could take.
Yeah.
Chris ended up in a clinical trial for the first ever gene therapy for a specific genetic mutation for ALS. But when we were having these conversations, there's no action to take. And in our minds, there's no reason to, it's kind of like that question, if you knew how you were going to die, would you want to know?
Yeah.
And so there was no reason to find that out for us at that point.
But I feel like you did not hesitate a second when you wondered if this could be it.
Oh no, once you know that this is in your family, every time you have a muscle twitch, which twitching muscles is one of the first sort of early signs of ALS, every time you have a cramp, every time whatever, like that, then you worry about that from that point on. Chris's dad had died of ALS less than a year before Chris's symptoms began. So it was very front of mind for us. When I met Chris, his one uncle had died, and in the subsequent years, another uncle had died, his only other paternal uncle had died, and his 28-year-old cousin had died as well. So it went from being kind of a abstract notion to being a very real possibility for us in those kind of ensuing years.
And as soon as Chris noticed something, did he say something to you immediately?
That's a great question. I don't know how long it took him to tell me, but there was definitely a period of weeks where we were very anxious while we were kind of trying to figure out, and Chris's sort of GP was, I don't know, this isn't really how ALS presents, which is kind of what we had thought as well. And so we ended up, even though we knew that we had this in our family, we ended up going down a rabbit hole that a lot of people who have, ALS is a process of elimination diagnosis, and it on average takes a year or more to be diagnosed. It did not take us that long because we were sounding the alarm. But there was definitely a period there where there was a lot of anxiety, and then you wonder how much of this is just anxiety, right? Psychosomatic and all of those things. So yeah, it was a very hard, I remember those months very distinctly, and I don't know about your experience with this, because I know Spencer wasn't actually sick for very long before you lost him, but that feeling of not knowing. And I think there's actual science around the fact that once you get a diagnosis, even if it's a horrible diagnosis, just the fact that you now know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So I remember those months as being some of the most stressful months. Not months, they were weeks.
Yeah.
Really, they felt like months.
There is this, looking back, the signs are so obvious.
Yeah. I can't believe we were fooling ourselves in that way.
Yeah. Chris, the thought was what was the diagnosis you were hoping in his hand?
A pinched nerve.
Yeah.
But he had no nerve pain. Nerves hurt.
Yeah. But I think this is important because I know how hard it is to get a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at, how long people live after their diagnosis, like that matters if it takes a year and a half, if it takes 2 years.
It matters hugely in ALS because a lot of trials, clinical trials, will you'll be disqualified based on how long you've had symptoms and or your breathing scores. And so if your lung function isn't great, you might not be able to join a trial. And if you've had symptoms for more than 2 years, you are very unlikely to be able to join a trial. So this is a big problem in ALS that a lot of people are working hard on, is time to diagnosis, because any sort of intervention, I mean, in any disease, the sooner the intervention, the better. But when you can't even access a trial because it took you so long to get diagnosed, that's a huge problem.
What are the barriers? Like there's the person, this is this is a pinched nerve. Mm-hmm. This is just this funny twitch I have with my hand. Mm-hmm. But what are the workable system delays here that we could work on fixing?
I mean, I think that part of the problem is that, when you go to your general practitioner and say, well, I'm having this weird, my speech is slurred, sometimes you're misdiagnosed with a stroke, I'm having this weakness in my hand, okay, well maybe you have carpal tunnel. They're not going there because your GP, maybe because we have this notion that ALS is a rare disease. Mm-hmm. People in the ALS community will tell you that that's not true. There's a very well-known statistic that every 90 minutes someone is diagnosed with ALS and every 90 minutes someone dies of ALS. So with that being said, that there's not ever a large number of people at any given time living with the disease because they are dying off as soon as they're being diagnosed. Yeah. And so as we get more treatments and patients are living longer, people with ALS are living longer, that will shift that. But I mean, just as an example, we got here, Leslie and I got here this evening at 5 o'clock. There was another event happening upstairs, and a man came in and said, "Oh, which event are you?" And Leslie said, "Oh, we're the ALS Society of Alberta." He said, "Oh, my mom died of ALS." Mm-hmm. And so once you're in this community and you start to say these 3 letters so often, the 6 degrees of separation is really probably 1. It's not as rare as people think. And so it's important for us to be talking about these things. And I've talked with people who were recently diagnosed who knew that these symptoms could be this because they followed Chris's story. And so this is why telling these stories matters, for the community of it, but also for the fact that we need people to understand what this disease looks like so they're aware of it, because it is going to become more and more prevalent.
Can I ask, how many people here have a personal connection with ALS? Yeah, but a lot of people don't, too, which, I mean, I'm really glad you came.
Yes.
I think that when I read 1 in 400 people, that surprised me.
Lifetime risk, yeah.
And we've talked as well in the past about when your person has cancer or dies from cancer, there is this just massive system built around you. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's so well recognized. Yeah. ALS is a different story.
Yeah, and it's a disease that, when you're diagnosed with ALS, any clinician that you tell, or any doctor that you tell, or any person who has a connection to the disease that you tell, that their face changes dramatically, because you'll hear people say it is one of the worst diseases. You lose, if you are the person with the disease, you lose yourself in pieces, and if you are the person who loves the person with the disease, you lose that person in pieces. The frustration of becoming completely paralyzed, while cognitively you are the exact same human, it's unique in the medical community, I think.
I don't know if you remember this, but when we first met, you said to me, I had heard about your story, I saw your story, but I had to put it aside because I wasn't ready to read it because it was really sad, and I knew it was really sad, and it is really sad. Yeah. But when you live in a really sad story, you realize, oh, there are incredible gifts in this story and like real moments of beauty. And I think the challenge is having someone who can tell a story that's really sad, but also shows like what beauty there is in this and what room there is to make change. And I think that's what you and Chris did so well. Like, was it one of you that said, you know, this sort of illness, this suffering, there are gifts in here?
Yeah, I don't know. I've certainly heard that, and I certainly feel that way. I think that grief and joy are two sides of the same coin. Understanding and having deep loss makes you understand and have deep joy in a different way. There's just more depth to both things. Chris was so good at that. Everyone who raised their hand is familiar probably with a swallow test. And when Chris had his swallowing test, which basically is gauging whether or not he was aspirating the things that he was swallowing, so the things he was trying to swallow were going in his lungs, he thought he was doing pretty great. He was like, yeah, I'm crushing this. And the speech language pathologist like stopped the test. She's like, that's not good. And so we left that appointment that day realizing, and then she had said like, well, his tongue is affected. And so in my mind, once your tongue was impacted and you're losing strength in your tongue, your speech is going to be impacted, right? Someone had told me, you know, with the tongue goes the speech, and that's all I could think in my head. And so we drove home from that appointment down at South Health and knew he was going to need a feeding tube, which we knew already. But, you know, he at that point had lost, you know, he was losing his ability to eat and drink. And then he's facing the fact that he's probably going to lose his ability to speak. And if Chris could have used one word to describe himself, he would have said, I'm a communicator. So that's a pretty devastating loss. And later that day, we like took the kids to an ODR, and he skated around with Willa. And then I don't know if it was that day or a day shortly after, and I was feeling very, very sad about this, right? Like about him losing his voice and the notion of him losing his voice. And I was doing dishes, and he was upstairs with the kids, and all of a sudden he was like, Kels, which he did all the time. It used to drive me nuts. I'd be doing something, and he'd pull me from like doing something important to like come see a replay on Sportsnet. You got to see this shot. Like, so it was like low on my list of important things. Like he thought everything was an emergency in that sense. So, you know, Kels, you got to come here, you got to see this. So I put down the dishes, and I go upstairs, and he's just standing in our son's bedroom, and it looked out at the sunset, and he's like, you just got to see the sunset. It's so beautiful. And I'm like, if he can see that, you know, when he's facing all this, and I think about that moment a lot. Every time I see a sunset or a sunrise, that, you know, there was one day when I was pulling out of the garage, he was in the ICU on a ventilator, and I was distraught. Like, I didn't know if he was going to come off the ventilator. This was before he died. And I pulled out of the garage to take the kids to school and then go to the ICU and sit with him. And the sunrise was beautiful. And I was like, oh, guys, the sky is so beautiful. And I caught myself, and I was like, the world can be beautiful even when it's sad. And I think that's something that Chris taught me. He always said I was a recovering pessimist, and he was an optimist, and he was a positive person. And so that's a lesson that he taught me, and that's a pretty invaluable lesson.
Mm-hmm. That comes through. If anyone here has listened to the podcast where Kelsie and Chris sort of sit down and interview each other, you go back and forth on this quite often. But also what is so powerful about those stories is that you don't shy away from sort of complicating the narrative, that you're not there just to tell a sad story or just a happy story or simply a story of hope. It's all of it. And one of the things that I think you did that was so valuable is the times you sat down and you talked about the challenges of caregiving. And can you speak to that decision to be so public about that? Because, I mean, sometimes you were annoyed with him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I felt honestly, I would have lots of people tell me how, oh, your love story, like it's such a great love story, and I'd be like, yeah, but he really makes me mad sometimes, and I can really be, I can really have too high of expectations for him or whatever, and so I have a big, maybe this is the journalist in me, like I have a big issue with inauthenticity, and so if I was going to share this, I felt like it was really important for people to see all the sides of it, because I certainly didn't want somebody to see this and be like, oh man, I'm not doing it right. Like it's hard. It's pretty much impossible, and we have to do it anyway. And I always wanted people to be able to see that real part of our life, and that it wasn't simple, and that marriage isn't simple when there isn't an illness. And an illness does not. An illness gives you this period of clarity. And I think if you've ever read Kate Bowler, she talks about this. And it's like the most pure version of like love and light, and all the support is coming at you, and everything seems so like fundamental. You're like, I get it. It's all love now. And then life, and then it's not realistic.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted, because we had that period where it was like, oh yeah, Chris, I think he was the one who always said, only love now. And I was like, oh yeah, well what about when you got annoyed at the kids for this or that or the other thing? And so I just felt like it was important to share that part.
And one of the things I heard from the two of you is that you were doing things wanted to do things to take a burden off the two of you. Like I'm thinking specifically about what he had for his hand. I can't remember the exact phrase for it.
He had a wrist brace. Yeah, it was just a brace.
That you had ordered it, and he was like,
oh, yeah.
I'm not getting that. And
I hate this, he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like so stubborn, yeah. I don't know, and someone else sent it to him?
Or someone else showed him that he had it, and then he was like, it's great, and he came home and told you you should order it.
And I was like, I returned that this summer. Yeah, and he ended up like that was a lifeline for him. But yeah, he kind of had to get to things on his own or someone else. I'd have to like plant it with someone else to tell him, you should tell Chris to wear slip-on shoes, which never worked.
But I think the fact that you put your journalism skills to finding clinical trials and finding doctors and finding things that would help made a difference. And I wonder like what other people could take from that experience, because I know that you feel like getting him into that clinical trial right away made a difference.
Oh, that was the difference, that clinical trial. Yeah, I mean, when we were getting diagnosed in Miami, Chris asked the doctor, what do I do now? And the doctor said, do what brings you joy. And in the same breath, he said, and you join this phase 3 clinical trial, which I had the like printouts about in my bag, but I didn't have to fight for that, which is not a normal experience. And he had already called. So we went to the University of Miami because they have one of the longest running familial ALS research studies. So they study people who have a genetic mutation in their family, whether or not they know if they have that mutation. And so Chris's dad had been a part of that study. So we, first of all, had the benefit of being able to get on the phone with one of the most renowned ALS specialists in North America very quickly after we suspected that this is what we were dealing with. We were down there in a week for sort of a research visit, and he was diagnosed in that, and then he had already called. At that point, Calgary wasn't a clinical trial site for Chris's trial. He called the neurologist in Toronto who runs that trial, and we were there in the next 3 weeks getting screened for that trial. Now, going further, that trial was 6 months long, and during that period, he had a 1 in 3 chance of getting placebo. Well, Chris's mutation is particularly aggressive, like a submutation of his mutation, and the life expectancy from symptom onset is 6 to 18 months. So to know that this is out there and it could be the thing, at that point, people are thinking, this could be the thing. Doctors who have watched things fail and fail and fail have hope in this, which made a huge difference to us. But then he still had that 1 in 3 chance of placebo. We now know, and we knew pretty much then because his progression stopped for about 9 months after he started the trial, that he was lucky enough to be on the drug arm. But yeah, I mean, so all these things have to line up for Chris to have lived as long as he did. And some of them are just, you know, a coin flip, and some of them are the fact that we had these resources. There's a lot of privilege in our experience. We also used to joke that we won the like shitty luck lottery because you get this disease, it's horrible, everyone says it's rare, blah, blah, blah. And then Chris's mutation only causes 1% to 2% of all ALS.
Okay.
And only those people can get this medication. So we were like, oh, you have this disease, but you get this, you know, so it was quite a swing.
And so if I understand the drug properly, it's not like cancer where you have phase 3 trials opening up all the time. Like
No.
this was and is really the only ALS medication that has been approved in the last.
Yeah, there are 3 right now approved ALS medications.
Okay.
This is the only one for a specific genetic cause of the disease. So Chris's genetic mutation was the first ever identified genetic mutation. It was only identified in like the 90s, 96 maybe. So it's just been the longest one studied. Yeah, so it's not common. Trials are hard to come by, and most of them have, I mean, overwhelmingly have failed. Yeah. So this is only the 3rd approved drug ever for ALS, and the only one that's shown any like real tangible benefit. There's still a lot of discussion about how much the other 2 drugs help.
Okay.
But this one has shown to, in slower progressing versions of Chris's mutation, he had a very aggressive progressing version. In slower mutations, stop progression, and some people have regained ability that they've lost. So it is a very big deal.
I think it's so challenging in ALS because you have familial is 10 to 15, you said, and the rest is sporadic.
Yeah.
And we don't know why.
Right.
Are we getting some clues? What is the state of the research there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the why is beyond my grasp. I understand the disease mechanisms better than I did before, and I think that a lot of the hopeful drugs right now are targeting those specific disease mechanisms. There's a lot of hope in gene therapy, gene editing. I think that any clinician would tell you now that they feel, and researcher, that it's a matter of when and not if. But it is harder fought for sporadic ALS. When we first sat down with the neurologist who ran the trial in Toronto, he said, I used to dread telling people that they had this type of ALS because it's so devastating for families. He said, and now I hope I can, because this is the one that's going to get figured out first.
Okay. Let's go back to your and Chris's story, because we met while he was on this trial.
Yep.
I think it was still blinded, like he was still, I think when we met, it was still unsure if he was on the medication or
I don't think
not.
so.
You think
he was in the open label
Okay.
at that point, yeah.
And things go like pretty well for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this change. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So pretty much 9 months of nothing, no progression. The progression in his dominant hand is where Chris's ALS started, and that stopped. We had like a mole on his like tricep, and we would be like, okay, it looks like it's still not above. Like you could see the atrophy in the lower part of his arm, right? It was a bit of that was past. That was gone, right? Like we weren't hopeful of that because it was already quite atrophied when he started the drug, but nothing really. And we thought, well, maybe we'll get to live this life as like a one-handed person, which is he found not hard at all. He was always like, one-handed life, so easy. No-handed life, very hard. So he started the trial in July of 2019, and around Easter of 2020, we were sledding, as one does at Easter here in Calgary, and we ran into a family that we knew from hockey, and no, that wasn't it. I was taking a picture of him and Willa, our daughter, and I took the picture, and then I was like, "You're making a weird face. Like, let's take another one." So then I took another one, and I was like, "You're still making a weird face. Like, just smile normal." And on the third picture, that was when it hit me, like, oh, this is progression. So he had a little droop in his smile, which was basically his signature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he had the most beautiful smile, magnetic, lit up a room. And so he started to lose his smile, and that was just something unexpected for us, because usually when you have limb onset ALS, it kind of makes its way through your limbs more before it moves into your like face muscles, swallowing muscles. You either have bulbar onset, which is your face and swallowing and all of that, or you have limb onset. But we always said Chris was a walking science experiment, and nobody really he was past his expiry, right? Like,
right.
He was supposed to be dead, he was still alive. Nobody really understood why the medicine was working or the way it was, right? So yeah, he had that droop in his smile. That kept getting worse. Probably around July of that year, he told me he was doing something called double swallowing, which people in the ALS world are familiar with. Basically, you feel like you have to swallow twice to get the food down.
Okay.
Because your swallowing muscles are weakening. And then by November of that year, he ended up with a feeding tube, and his bulbar ALS was quite severe at the time of his death. Yeah.
So that first change in his smile, one, it's so hard because it changes the way he projects himself to the world. And for a communicator, that's a big deal. But I also think it must have been another really scary level, because suddenly it seems like the more aggressive.
It felt
version.
like he was being diagnosed all over again.
Yeah.
Because for those 9 months, we had hope that it was done, that it would stay this way. You know, when he was diagnosed in Miami, Dr. Benatar, the neurologist who diagnosed him, told him, I said to him, is there a chance that this drug could stop Chris's progression? And he said, we don't know, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. And well, that is all, especially he needed as the recovering pessimist, but he ran with that, and we both did. And then when we saw that the progression stop, you just hope and hope that that's what's happening. And so we did not expect, they kind of told us, ALS is not linear, the progression is different for everybody, but the doctor who diagnosed him kind of said what we would expect next is you'll start to experience difficulty raising your arm above your right arm, which is where he first had his symptoms, raising it above your head, your shoulder will start to weaken, et cetera, et cetera. And he could do that until the day he died.
Right.
So, we were just not expecting that at all. And it seemed like this kind of extra, because that doesn't happen to everybody, that they lose their ability to smile and all. Most people end up losing their ability to speak. But it just seemed like an extra twist of the knife because it was so a part of who he was.
I remember as you were going through this, and that your people reading your blog, showing up to drop things off on the front step, but also I could see how lonely it was and that no one could really reach you anymore because the two of you were just in a different place. I don't know what the question is there, I think, except for the fact that you chose to keep sort of reaching out to tell us how hard it was.
Yeah, it felt like yelling into the void. It felt like there are absolutely other people who are experiencing the isolation of caring for somebody, the devastation of your person, of your husband turning into your patient. That's a huge loss. And it felt really important to say that out loud and to say that, like, I'm honored to care for Chris, and this is the worst job I've ever had in my life. It's awful. It's exhausting. It's the level of burnout, the level of anxiety is so high.
all the time. Irritable, I'm not fun to be around, I can't enjoy the things in life that I want to enjoy. And the other side of that coin is you know, one day when a friend said to me, like, it won't always be this hard, and I said, right, because he'll be dead.
Yeah, yeah. That you sort of treasure those really hard moments.
But I
because
didn't.
something.
They're horrible.
No, but
Yeah, they
yeah, I didn't and I did.
Yeah,
I didn't and
I can
I
look
did.
back now, but in those moments, it was just like, and you feel horrible. I'm like, I must be the most selfish person. Like, he's going through this, and also I really don't want to go do X, Y, and Z for him right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an impossible situation to be in because it's not what you signed up for
No.
in marriage, right? Like, you signed up for this partnership, you signed up for, and that wasn't, and your role totally shifts. Like, your dynamics shift. Chris was always, you know, my barometer, and now he looked to me for that, and I wasn't prepared for that,
Yeah.
and who I had to be in my marriage was totally different.
I think it really matters to people that you say that, because I recognize parts of myself in there, and I'm sure other people in the room recognize parts of themselves in that story too.
It's so hard because, you know, ALS is this disease where, like, it's happening every day. You're losing something else. There's not, like, a good day where you can do this, right? It's gone. When it's gone, it's gone. And it's so exhausting, and it's so hard. It's such a hard life. But you know that the only reprieve is you're losing the person you love most. So the sort of constant, like, internal, like, war that you're waging, it feels horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm so sorry, my friend. And my story is really different. My husband died of cancer, but he had 42 days between the day he was diagnosed and the day he died. So we also never had, like, moments where you have a break. It's
Yep.
like every day is so dramatically worse than the day before. And it's really hard to watch the person you love so much, who has so much ahead of them, suffering to the point where you think, I don't know if this is bearable for either of us anymore. And that's so hard to say out loud.
It really, really is, and it's important to say, and it's important to also, like, and that's what I mean when I say that grief, like, sharpens the joy, because it is equal to that. Like, when you have those moments of where, like, they're precious, and when you have them, they're so much richer because you know the depth of real, like, human despair. Like, you know that. And I think we do a disservice in this disease to not talk about that reality. It's very true. And you know, is it sad? Is it depressing? Well, yeah, it is. And also, there are all these other things. There are these beautiful sunsets and these beautiful sunrises, and there's waking, you know, one year, the year he was diagnosed, woke Cohen up, our son, he was 7, woke him, or 8, woke him up at 3 in the morning and said, let's go to Game 7 of the World Series. Like, that's who Chris was, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's go to the Super Bowl. I don't want to go to the Super Bowl. It was amazing. Of course, everybody should go to the Super Bowl. I'm a big fan. But all these things that he always wanted to do, and, you know, the thing that I loved about his approach was, like, Chris's bucket list was so simple, and it was just, like, time spent with the people he loved, whether it was at the lake in New Hampshire that he grew up on. I mean, we did big things for sure. We did the Super Bowl, we did, you know, Stanley Cup finals games. Like, we did all those things too. But he wanted time with people that he loved, and it really didn't matter what that looked like. It was like family bike rides and ice cream for lunch, and, you know, it was all those little things. And the fact that he could do that while staring all this in the face and do it so publicly. You know, me telling this story, me being sad publicly is one thing, but Chris was losing the things that made him who he was, and he showed up every single day and kept doing it.
Yeah. I would argue you're doing the same. You said something to me, just like, I don't know, casual is the right way to say it, but you were talking about this new role, and you said, you know, I just have to make a choice. Am I going to start moving forward, or I'm just going to keep moving laterally? That really sort of got me. Sorry, again. I told you I use my hands all the time.
She's Greek.
So tell me about like your plans and your hopes for the next chapters. And as we've been talking, these two coyotes just went right by here.
I wondered what you were looking at. I was like, what are you looking at? Crazy. Well, it was probably around a year ago. I always find like December's hard. My anniversary is December 15th. Christmas is hard. And then the world gets really dark, and that's my jam.
Yeah.
But January, February, March, since Chris died, have been rough months for me. And this past year, I felt like I'm so scared of letting go of Chris. It felt like I was like white knuckling, like onto everything, like him, our life that we were supposed to have together, and all the things that I was scared of losing if I let go. And I started to have sort of a number of, I'm not a woo-woo person, but I do believe in signs, and I started to get a lot of signs that suggested that I needed to do something, start taking some steps forward, and I started to think about like loosening my grip instead of letting go. You know, I'm sure you can relate to being really scared of time passing.
Yeah.
Because you're farther removed from your memories, you're farther removed from the world that existed with your person in it. And it still can be quite shocking and surreal that the world keeps going, even though this like most integral person to you is gone. But I started to just think like, what am I, like, I have to do something. I have to change something. I did go see a medium, and she said he doesn't want you to live the same life minus him. He wants you to build a new life. And of course, like, she could tell me that, but I also knew that Chris would have said that, you know those things. So, you know, it was probably in January or February of last year, and I messaged Leslie, who I have known. ALS Society helped us a lot with different equipment when Chris was sick. And I asked if she wanted to have a coffee, and she told me a little bit then that they were going to be posting a job like the one that I have, which is basically an intermediary between the society and the research network. And, you know, the community engagement and the community building that the society does, and that is incredibly important to me, and something I'm really passionate about. You know, I think that's been the whole point of my advocacy is bringing people together. And then research is the other thing that I care deeply about. You know, you don't have to, like, it doesn't take long to connect the dots that my husband's disease is genetic, and I have 2 kids. I have a sister-in-law, I have a niece and nephew. I have a lot of skin in this game. And doing nothing felt like a ridiculous thing to do. So, you know, right away when I started this, you know, people that I was working with would say, like, you know, we understand this could be hard for you if you ever need time. And Leslie's definitely been on the receiving end of like, actually, I cannot even think about these 3 letters today, so I'm just going to sign off. And they've been great about that. But in reality, like, I feel so close to Chris every day doing this, and I know how proud that he would be of me. And I can't imagine a life where, like, this disease doesn't leave you, even if you don't have a gene in your family. But I can't imagine a life where I don't do anything to do what I don't do anything to try to make this better for people.
So what are I know that this is, well, I think this is like a storytelling sort of series or like ongoing thing that you want to do. what do you want to change about the way people gather and talk about ALS?
Yeah, I want people to understand the disease, and I want people who have lived through the disease and are living through the disease to not feel like they're doing it by themselves. ALS is an incredibly isolating disease because it's similar to what you said about Spencer's cancer. Like every single day, you're just getting walloped by another thing, and you can't come up for air. You know, if you have a slower progressing version, then you have more of a chance to do that. That Chris's drug gave us that chance. He did not have that version, that slower progressing version, but his drug gave us that chance to do that. And so I just, want to be, whether it's a podcast that somebody can listen to in their 5 minutes that they have by themselves when they're caring for their person, or, a conversation that they can come to and be in a room of people who get it, I feel like that's just so important to me. And I do, I talk all the time about that Joan Didion quote, we tell ourselves stories in order to survive. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I think that you're absolutely right. When I first read your story, I put it away and thought, that sounds awful and I don't want to. And I think this is a state, for me, that was one of the stages of grief, was like, that was probably my denial. Like I didn't want anybody else's sad stories. And then it flipped so hard for me in the other direction. And I only wanted to be around people who understood.
Same. And I know we both love great writers so much. And in the early days, I couldn't even read. And that's when I knew I was almost broken. If I can't read, I've read my whole life. But then when I started to be able to focus on a page, and I saw someone else's pain on the page that was a mirror of mine, it was this sense of community and this recognition that I survived this, and you can survive this too, and we are all working to make this better and honor these sad stories.
Yeah, and it can be in any medium, right? And that's why a podcast or this or a book or whatever it is, I want there to be multiple chances for people to access that feeling, because it's an incredibly important feeling. For me, I could always read, but I could not read fiction. I was like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Just
do not give me made up things.
Why do you need to make things up? There's enough good stories out there.
Yes.
One time I got this box of books from Amazon, and my son was standing there and I was opening it and he's like, what's that? And I was like, books. And he's like, about what? And I was like, sad things. And he was like, yep. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, and I do have it kind of written because it's a quote that we were talking about the other day. It's actually quite long. We were talking about how are you and how hard that question is, and we both loved this interview with a woman who just lost her spouse, who was a poet, and she said, I don't want you to ask me how I'm doing. I want you to tell me a story of something, or something that's happened in your life recently that feels like it's grazing some part of what you're experiencing right now. And we're like, that's so good.
Yeah, so good.
Do you have?
Yeah, I got a million. Yesterday on the way to school, my son goes out to Edge, which is by Callaway Park, and the sky, the sunrise was orange and pink, but then it bent around, and in the mountains it was purple and pink, and we rode to school the whole way, just I don't know, he must have taken 100 photos, just at how awesome it was, and I'm constantly amazed at how beautiful the world is, even though I so often feel so broken.
Yeah.
And you can move within that in a moment. That amazes me. My kids will do something or say something, and it's just like Chris, right? And that moment grazes how I feel, because I'm like, I cannot express how beautiful it is to see him in them, and then how sad I am that he's gone.
He would be really proud of you.
Thank you.
I know that he believed you were capable of things that you never even believed you were capable of, and I think you've sat up here tonight and proved him right.
Thank you. I have one more that I'll tell you when you say that, because I do a weird thing in the car where I'm like, I'll shuffle like my, you know, I'll have like the liked songs playlist on Spotify, and there's like 600 songs or something on it. And when I'm like really sad and I need to know that he's around, I'll like shuffle it and I'll be like, play this song. And he loved that song, The Best by Tina Turner. And on the way here, that's what came up.
Oh, that is the best.
Yeah. So he's here.
He is here. It was not lost on me that it was a pair of wild animals walking down the street for us. I love you, my friend, and we are all very proud of you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
And so we have like a short film, like very short. I don't know if even film is the right word, but
yeah, it's just a little video
screen.
message from Dr. Gord Jewett. Dr. Jewett is a neurologist here in Calgary, and he's the chair of our the steering committee for the research network. And he actually was one of the neurologists who very often gave my husband his every 4-week spinal tap. So we go way back. And Dr. Jewett is, I think, on service this week, so he can't be here. But he wanted to record a short message to just talk about ARN a little bit, which is what we call the Alberta ALS Research Network, so we don't have to say Alberta so many times. And yeah, just kind of what we're doing and why he has hope right now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session today to hear a patient and a
Oh, no.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session today to hear a patient and a family story that really is the reason that we are all working hard to solve and cure ALS. I'm Dr. Gordon Jewett. I'm a researcher and ALS neurologist at the University of Calgary, and I wanted to share with you some of the hope that I have for ALS research. I've only been involved in ALS care and research for about 5 or 6 years now since I finished my training, but I've really stumbled into this community in a time of great hope. In Alberta, particularly, we have a lot of research strengths, and the ALS Society of Alberta has helped us form the newly minted Alberta ALS Research Network, or ARN, and this is a collaboration between the Society, between the University of Calgary and the University of Alberta neurologists and researchers that we hope will really drive forward what we can do to help cure this disease. The Alberta ALS Research Network is going to form stronger collaborations between the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary. It's going to ensure that we have strong fundamental, translational, and clinical research programs that make us a world leader in research and ensure that people living with this disease in Alberta have the opportunity to participate in cutting-edge research that provides all of us with hope, and also, as you heard today, provides some direct benefits in some rare cases. It's easy living with this disease to lose hope, and I wanted to share with you today some of the hope that I have for how we're moving forward. In Alberta, we've got really important projects that are addressing the cause of ALS, that are working hard to develop new treatments, and are also innovating in the way we care for this disease. Capture ALS, which is a natural history study that's run out of the University of Alberta by Dr. Kalra, is a really exciting project where we're studying in great detail people that live with ALS and collecting samples that will allow us to understand why some people have different phenotypes of disease or different presentations of disease. And that basic understanding of the disease is really important to creating therapies. And that data set created by Capture and collected by Capture is going to allow countless fundamental and translational science researchers move their work forward to solve this disease. We also have the ALS registry within the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry here at the University of Calgary. And that's a project where we're hoping to involve every single person in Canada living with ALS to try and understand how frequent ALS is, where it's occurring across our country, and make sure that we can connect people with research as it becomes available in their areas. We've also got really exciting fundamental science projects, such as a model of disease that's being developed at the University of Alberta by Dr. Allison and Dr. Duval. And this is a project that will allow us, hopefully, to test new therapies in a really efficient way early on to screen them before they go to clinical trials in people living with ALS. And then at the University of Alberta and University of Calgary, we've also got many clinical trials running, and we're always working to bring more clinical trials to people with ALS in Alberta. And ultimately, these are the studies that test whether a therapy is effective or not and allow it to become available to participants or patients. Globally, there's also a lot of hope. There's probably at least 50 clinical trials worldwide for therapies running right now, and that is a massive pace of innovation that was not present prior to my involvement or over 5 years ago when I became involved in the research community. We had an approved therapy in Canada for ALS in the 1990s, and then there was nothing until about 2017 that was approved. And so we had a period where we were trying a lot of therapies and had a lot of negative trials. But since then, we've had 3 other therapies approved in Canada. Unfortunately, one of them we discovered with later phase trials was not as effective as we hoped. But that's the value of these clinical trials. And so we now have, at least in a small subset of genetic ALS, as you heard today, we have a very effective treatment, probably the most effective treatment we've ever seen in ALS. And although that's the tip of the iceberg, it allows us to apply those learnings to hopefully provide benefit to everyone living with ALS. So this is a time where we're seeing great rate of innovation. And in Alberta in particular, we have really strong programs. And we really appreciate the support from all of our ALS community to support research in the province here, to support the Alberta ALS Research Network. And as you may know, that we also have new opportunities for everyone to get involved right now. The Jennifer Prest Bulber ALS Fund, which is a research fund focused on treating the form of ALS that presents with swallowing difficulties or speaking difficulties. And those symptoms affect many people with ALS throughout their disease. And so we have a special research program now where if you make a donation, there are matching funds available from Jennifer Prest's husband. And this is a really exciting way that we can fund super important research in the province. And I hope you'll consider supporting us. Again, thank you for being here today. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to speak with you all, but I look forward to sharing more hope and more progress with you in the coming years.
We have a little bit of time left, and Kelsie very generously said that she would answer questions from the audience if anyone had any. We do have people with microphones, so if you do have questions, just raise your hand. I do see one back here already.
Congratulations on your first storytelling, fantastic. I'm really curious about and appreciate the openness. I kind of hear sprinkling about the children in the story. I'm really curious about the when and the how and the context of first introducing them to this. And even though they could have been really young, children absorb. So I'm just curious about the children journey. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most common questions that I get. We told our kids things incrementally, which I think most professionals would tell you that that's how you should do it, to offer them the information that they're asking for, but not more than that. And for me, definitely, it was that I would never lie to them about anything. I think that's obviously very important. our story in talking to our kids was always a little bit different because we did have that message of hope from the clinicians that we were working with. So early on it was, dad's been having trouble with his hand. The good news is that he can get on this new medicine that doctors are really excited about. There's a chance that it could get worse. There's a chance that it could just stay the way it is. We just don't know yet. And then it wasn't too terribly long after that our son, who was, our kids were 7 and 4 when Chris was diagnosed. And so I think by then our son was 8, and we were all kind of just like wrestling on our bed together one Saturday afternoon. And our son just kind of stopped and looked at Chris and said, hey, Dad, is what's wrong with your hand what happened to Grandpa, the same thing as what happened to Grandpa Bob? And so then they drew that parallel, and we talked to them about that, and why our hope for Chris was different. Chris's dad, I think, could have joined the phase 2 trial for Chris's drug, but opted not to. So Chris is the first person in his family to be on tofersen, which is the name of his drug. And then, over the years, things unfolded in different ways at different times. We had conversations about feeding tubes. There was definitely a time when our son, when he was quite young still, early on in the process, asked, if you got this from your dad, can I get this from you? And that's, that was a conversation that Chris and I had about how we would address that. These 3 letters are in our lives every single day. The kids know what I do for work. They know what's going on in the world of ALS research. I tell them about things that I find exciting. It's just a part of our life now. They both understand that they have a chance of developing this disease. Kids are very smart, and it does not take them long, and they don't have to be very old to figure that out. So it's a conversation we have. I am in pretty frequent communication with the neurologist in Toronto. He was Chris's favorite doctor, I think, because he was like a very East Coast personality, and Chris grew up in Boston, so Chris really loved him. And Dr. Zinman is a very well-known, well-respected expert in ALS, and does a lot of work and is on a lot of medical journals. And the very first day that we were at that clinical trial meeting, the screening, he put his hand on my knee and he looked in my eyes and he said, I don't want you to worry about your kids. And I've held on to that, and I have revisited it with him. There have been times when I have emailed him or called him and said, still say it again, like, is it true? Do you still, like, is that still the case? He still very much believes in that. And, I've had conversations with the doctors who have, the researchers who have created this drug about, hey, it's not good enough. Like, obviously it's not good enough. So, there's work being done all the time. And I would be absolutely lying to you if I said this didn't terrify me.
Hi, Kelsie.
Hi, Leslie. This is my boss.
Is this turned on? Can you hear me? Thank you so much. I really appreciate how vulnerable you are, and I think that your story, so many people can resonate with so many different parts about it, so thank you. I'm interested to know what advice you would give to someone who has just been told that their loved one has ALS.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Chris was first diagnosed, I was searching very high and low for a story that I could relate to. So if I could go back to then, Kelsie, I would say, like, finding a peer that is maybe a bit further ahead of you in your care, in their journey, is useful. Some of the most impactful things that people said to me after Chris was diagnosed were from people who had lost their person, and would send me a message when I had like sort of either in the podcast or publicly written about, you know, my fear about how losing Chris would impact my kids. And, you know, I will never forget a message from a mom saying, my kids are okay and your kids will be okay. And I can sit here and cry with you guys tonight, and also I'm okay. You learn how to move with your grief and your loss, and I think that perspective is really important. And then I would say that you have to take in the information that you feel capable of taking in. It's a lot all at once. And different people, you have to know yourself. Like, do you want all the information? Are you I did. I wasn't, you know, I wanted all the information. And then, you know, you have to, I would say, you just need to do your best to live in a very present way. I think I love everything that Suleika Jawad says. She, I think, now has leukemia for the 3rd time in her young life. And she said that it became so exhausting for her when people would tell her to live each day like it was her last. She's like, if we all did that, it would be irresponsible, and everyone would be like draining their bank accounts, and like, you know, and also it's just an incredible amount of pressure. And I felt that very much during Chris's disease, and I put that pressure on him a lot. I know I did. But she said, I saw a video of her recently saying that she likes to live every day like it's her first, like with wonder, with awe. And I think that's a really lovely perspective. So I just wanted to mention this. We have a research webinar on Friday, this Friday, at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and it's an update from Dr. Jewett, who you just saw in the video, and Dr. Yanisova, who's at the University of Toronto, and they've been doing work with the Jennifer Prest-Bulber ALS Fund, which you already heard about, and you know the funds we're raising now are going to continue their work and help them apply sort of some of the research that they've done in a broader way. And so both doctors will speak, and some student researchers will also speak, and you can sign up and get the link there. And was there anything else I was supposed to talk about? Okay, I think that's it.
I think everyone just wants to say an enormous thank you to you for sharing so much of your story and for continuing to do this work. And you inspire so many of us, and we're so grateful for what you're doing. So thank you. Love you.